For the fourth straight day, protesters in the nation's capital have been free to demonstrate against COVID-19 restrictions, while residents have been warned by police to work from home and avoid the downtown area. Symbols of hate appeared on Parliament Hill over the weekend, with swastikas and the Confederate flag flying among thousands of demonstrators.
Ottawa police saying they are investigating criminal activity and racist behavior, adding they have never seen this level of civil disobedience. So let's reflect on what this means for public safety and the level of tolerance for hate here in Canada. To discuss, we welcome to CP24 tonight Ottawa MD Dr. Nili Kaplan-Murth, Bernie Farber, chair of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, that is, and Fareed Khan, founder of Canadians United Against Hate. Thanks to all of you for being here with us. Fareed, what's your response to people who say today it's just a few bad apples?
Well, the fact is it's not a few bad apples. The organizers of this protest are people with known records of Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and racism. And they are the ones who are responsible ultimately for everything. And the fact is that these people were allowed to, the ones with the signs, the swastikas, the Confederate flag, they were allowed to walk around freely. And the others who were there did nothing to tell them, we don't want that message here. So as far as I'm concerned, the vast majority who allowed that to happen are also responsible by their silence.
Bernie, what do you make of the behavior, the societal acceptance of it, at least, of how Fareed is describing it? Does this embolden others?
Well, of course it does in the long run. I mean, listen, we have to, especially in this day and age, given the proliferation of hate that we have seen literally across this continent, to take a stand. Silence, and Fareed is right, silence is basically acquiescence. There can be no silent partners anymore. And I'm a child of Holocaust survivor, a man, my father, who lost his entire family and was the only surviving Jew of his village. And he came to this country in order to build a new life of freedom and democracy. To see, for me, a swastika flying on Parliament Hill and nobody confronting it is it's inexplicable. I just can't understand it. Now, that said, very quickly, I will add how difficult it is for people to do those kinds of confrontations because they do fear for their safety. And that's a whole other issue that bears discussion.
Dr. Kaplan-Murth, Ottawa Public Health, now we know, had to close a couple of vaccination clinics because of those protests this weekend. Can you tell us a bit about what you heard and saw the last couple of days? I mean, were you concerned for your safety?
Absolutely. So I was walking to my office to give a talk to the Ontario College of Family Physicians about why it's so important for physicians to advocate. And on my way to my office, I encountered people who were walking in front of me with the same vulgar flags that we've seen many times. And they were joking about white supremacy. And they are the same people who had been downtown. They are all around us. My office is in central Ottawa. My patients live and work downtown. We are all exhausted and scared. It is not something that is nuanced. There's no just a few bad apples. We're talking about absolutely inexcusable violence, transphobic placards, as well as the swastikas, as well as the Confederate flags, intimidating community members, grabbing masks off of people, throwing stones at ambulances. So as we've heard, the police have to accompany ambulances. Food being stolen from Shepherds of Good Hope, which is a shelter downtown. Like, all of it is inexcusable. And the thing about it is that this isn't new. It isn't new. As a doctor, I have been bombarded with nastiness, with all kinds of Nazi and other anti-Semitic hate mail, death threats, as people know. I've had my colleagues encounter the same kinds of things, other forms of racism, other forms of discrimination. It's been nonstop, and it's been escalating. And all of this hate-fueled, misogynist, violent attack that that we have experienced privately is now being experienced publicly. So shame on those politicians who emboldened people to come to our city and do that to us in the streets. Shame on anyone who thinks that it's okay to fill our streets with hate. And we have now Bill C3, which protects physicians and other healthcare workers from intimidation and harassment, and protects patients who are being harassed or intimidated when they're seeking care. But what happens when the entire city is under siege, when we can't have the health clinics that we need to, we can't have kids go to school, and we can't have businesses open because of that same harassment? It's just unconscionable.
It's almost a privilege to not feel fear from what you just described there. Dr. Farid, what would you say about that? Is it a privilege to not be intimidated by what's been put on display for days in the nation's capital?
Well, yes. I mean, I think it is a privilege, and the fact is, the million or more residents of Ottawa over these last few days have not felt that privilege. The people who were down in downtown Ottawa, who drove in from wherever they came from, they are like an occupying army. And the trucks are like tanks sitting in front of the Parliament building. I mean, for God's sakes, the organizers of this protest posted a manifesto calling for the insurrection and overthrow of the Canadian government. Now, I will tell you, if you had Black or Brown or Muslims or Indigenous people who did something like that and came into downtown Ottawa and did the things that these vast majority white people did, I will tell you that the security forces of this country would come down on them like a bag of hammers. And the fact is, these people have threatened the elected officials of this country. And the fact that they're conservative MPs who are rubbing shoulders with them and getting all chummy with them, I think it's despicable. Those people should resign their seats, because what they have done is they have violated their oath of office to defend the rights of Canadians and to stand up for the Charter of Rights. Now, while there is a charter defense for peaceful protest, what happened and what's happening in Ottawa is not peaceful protest. And I can tell you, because I've organized protests myself, but you know what I didn't do? I didn't assault people who are on the street. I didn't urinate, none of our participants urinated or defecated in public places and desecrated things like the War Memorial or the Terry Fox statue. So I find everything that's happened this weekend to be just reprehensible, and the politicians who are encouraging them, they have to pay a price.
So, Bernie, to Farid's point about the police response this weekend, how does that compare to, other major events we've seen in Canada, like the BLM protests and First Nations pipeline protests?
Farid is quite right. Neely is quite right. Even here in Toronto, for example, we had the police deciding to clear a park of homeless people, and they did it in less than 6 or 7 hours. And yet here we have a situation where, amongst this crowd are hate mongers, neo-Nazis, white supremacists walking around with Nazi flags, Confederate flags, very freely being completely insubordinate to anything that we know as civil. Now listen, I was brought up in Ottawa. I've attended marches from way back, from the anti-Vietnam War days to the present day, and I have not, to this day, seen the kind of racist, bigoted material on Parliament Hill ever before. So we have a situation here. I listened to the Prime Minister today. I give him credit. He was strong. He was forthright. But I'm very disappointed by Erin O'Toole. I think the Leader of the Opposition ought not to have met with these people, ought not to have given them support and support, because it just drives them, and it drives the whole thing forward. Even if a larger number of these people were there for anti-vax purposes, which I totally disagree with anyway, but they have that right to do that. They don't have the right to walk around hatefully intimidating people and bullying people. That's not the Canadian way.
It sounds like it is online, at least from what Dr. Kaplan-Murth has been describing. Doctor, at what point should this have stopped? When would you have liked society to have intervened to avoid what unfolded this weekend?
So back in September of 2021, I stood in front of Queen's Park, and at the time there were stones being thrown at the Prime Minister, and there were protests that were starting outside of hospitals. And I said, this has to stop, that we can have respectful conversations across political differences. We can have conversations about public health policy and the politics of healthcare without violence. And we knew that there was going to be an increase in this kind of vitriol because we receive it daily. Today, the CEO of the Children's Hospital in Ottawa, Alex Munter, said, we've been dealing with this. We've all been dealing with this, and we've had to deal with it privately. And now we've said, this is what we're talking about. And it really is not about vaccines. This is not about science or public health at all. This is an opportunity to be hateful. And, when we have conversations with our patients and when we have conversations with the community and we talk about the reasons for public health policy, we can do that respectfully. But what is going on in Ottawa has nothing to do with science. It has nothing to do with vaccines, and it has nothing to do with truckers. One of the first people I gave a vaccine to who reached out to me because he was having trouble accessing vaccine was a person who drives a truck back and forth between Canada and the United States. And he was so grateful. And somebody wrote today and said that, that he and all of his colleagues who work in the trucking industry feel ashamed that this is happening. This does not represent them either.
A really interesting conversation, an important one too. Thanks so much for your time and your perspective to all three of you, Dr. Kathleen Mirth, Bernie Farber, and Fareed Khan. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.